Alrighty, guys. Well, I hope y'all enjoyed your long break, and I know I did, most of it. Um, but we're going to go ahead and get started back. We are going to move on to Unit 7, talk about similarity. And the first lesson in similarity is going to be on ratios and proportions. And we start here because this is so vital to the aspects of similarity because you're going to be setting up proportions to solve. And if you can't solve a proportion, then this unit is going to be kind of hard. So that's why we start here to make sure we know what we're doing. So we'll start with some definitions and properties, and then we'll use the properties. So a ratio we define as a comparison of two quantities. And in math, we usually write it like this. You have A with a colon to B. So those could be numbers like, and we say it like A to B, 3 to 4, 5 to 6, whatever, something like that. You can also write it as a fraction, which you're probably more used to. So you probably learned in middle school, ratio just means a fraction. And so we can write it that way as long as the bottom is not zero. Everything we do, the bottom won't be zero. Everything will be nice and pretty. Okay, a proportion, however, is a statement that says two ratios are equal. Okay, and the way they're usually written is A over B equals C over D. And so I usually tell myself fraction equal fraction. That's what I tell myself when I think of a proportion. Okay, now we've got four properties that are associated with proportions, and we're actually going to use those in a minute to verify if certain things are equivalent. Okay, so everything is going to be based off this proportion. I'm going to copy it again each time. Okay, if this is true, then we can say, and that means just implies. I mean, it's fancy. I just don't want to have to write. Then we can say, you just write that big double arrow. Then we say that AD equals BC. So notice how I get that. You have A over B equals C over D, and I say it's the same thing as this. So the top of the first times the bottom of the second fraction equals the bottom of the first times the top of the second. And we call this the cross product property or cross multiply, which is probably what you were told. Maybe like a butterfly thing, kind of like maybe something like that. You probably called it butterfly. I don't call it butterfly. I call it cross multiply. But whatever helps you remember cross multiply. That's essentially what that is. And this comes in handy later when we actually solve proportions. Another property, we start with the same thing. If that's true, then we can say B over A equals D over C. So notice the difference in these two. We had A over B, C over D. Now we've got B over A, D over C. We've essentially just flipped these two. And that's okay. That's totally legit. We can flip them and they're still the same. Like flip on their heads. Okay? The third property, A over B, C over D, then implies A over C equals B over D. So now notice the difference in these two. we had A over B and C over D. Now we have A over C and B over D. So the way my brain thinks about this is instead of reading down, we go across and then put the ones on top over each other and the ones on the bottom over each other. If that makes sense. So instead of going this way, we go this way. All right? Last one. This one's kind of weird, but we say that A plus B over B equals C plus D over D. So what we've done is we've taken the bottom of the first fraction and added it to the top. See, we had B on the bottom, so we added it to the top. And then we had D on the bottom and added it to the top of that one. That's equivalent to the original. Sometimes that'll happen. All right, there's all our properties and definitions. Now we're actually going to use these things. All right, so the first 4 problems I've got for you here is just using those equivalence things. So notice every time we've got the same proportion. A over B equals 3 over 4. Oops. Sorry, paper's crooked. There we go. We've got A over B equals 3 over 4 every time. Okay, and I've started a statement for you each time. You have to tell me what the question mark is. And I'm actually going to put this paper here so we can reference those things if we need to. I'll pull it back in a minute. I'm walking away. All right. So notice we had 4A equals blank is what we were started with. Well, look back at your proportion. 4A means 4 times A. Oops, sorry, I'm blocking it. 4A is 4 times A. So notice it's 4 and A. That's like we've started the cross multiply or cross product, which is the first property. Okay? So if I match up 4 to A, then I have to match up B to 3. B times 3 is going to give us 3B. That's really all it is. Okay? Second one. So notice what we start with. A over B equals 3 over 4. Now I've started a second one. I have B over A. So compare it to the original. What have I done? I've taken the first fraction and turned it on its head, flipped it over. To keep everything equal, I have to do the same thing to the second one. So I'm going to take 3 over 4 and flip it to 4 over 3. And that's it. Okay? Let's go to this one first. A over B equals 3 over 4. Now look what I've done. I have 4 over B. So if I'm looking at my original, the only way I can get that is if I go across like this. And notice the 4 was written first. So that means I went from the right to the left. I went back kind of towards the left. So to keep everybody the same, I have to start with 3 and go towards A. So this would be 3 over A. Okay? And I hope you're picking up on you have whatever this first fraction, however it's written, determines how the second one's written. Okay? He's kind of the deciding factor. He decides what happens to the second one. All right, last one. This is the weird one. So look what we start with. We had A plus B over B. This is that fourth property that's kind of strange. We've taken the bottom of the first and added it with the top. So I must do the same thing with the second fraction. So I have to do 3 plus 4 over 4. And that will simplify to 7 over 4. And on those where you have numbers, I do want you to simplify. So you should end up with just a fraction. Whether or not it's the top's bigger or not doesn't matter. Alrighty then. Now we're going to talk about solving proportions. And these are so stinking easy. I don't want you to mess them up. I mean, they're literally easy. Use this first property of cross multiplication. That's all you're going to use. So the way I tell myself is go from the top of the first to the bottom, and it's multiplication. Remember, it's always multiplication. X times 4, 4x equals. Now go the other way. From the bottom of the first to the top of the second. 2 times 8 is 16. Okay? And then we solve. I have to divide by 4. There we go. X equals 4. Simple as that. Same thing. Top to bottom, multiplication, that'd be 5x equals bottom to top, 6 times 6, 36. Divide 5, divide 5. That is not even, so just give me the decimal, 7.2. And notice sometimes you will get decimals. Sometimes you get nice whole numbers. Sometimes you get decimals or a fraction if you want to. Write as a fraction, you could do that. Okay, these get a little weirder because now we've got like a 2-term area. Like those are technically called binomials, which you should know that. We got binomials in certain areas. So what we do, let me show you on this first one. So this whole top, that is a v subtract 9. V is in velociraptor. V subtract 9 has to be multiplied by the 3. So the way I'm going to write it is like this. I'm actually going to kind of reverse it. Because both of these things have to be multiplied by 3, I'm going to write it as like a distributive problem. Then equal 7 times v, 7v. All right, now we have to distribute. 3v subtract 27 equals 7v. I'm going to move the smaller of the v's. I'm going to come up this way. Negative 27 equals 4v. Divide 4. Divide 4. So notice this time, if you divide that, you're going to get negative 6.75. So not only can you have decimals, you can have negative answers. I think it's only this specific lesson that we'll get negative answers for our proportions. Later on in the unit, you shouldn't have any negatives. But here you can. All right. So same thing, except obviously it's written a little different. So the 8 is multiplied to everybody down here. So always write it as a distributive problem. That's the easiest way to do it. And then 5 times n is 5n. Now we'll distribute. So 8n plus 24 equals 5n. Let's subtract. I'm going to subtract the bigger one this time because it's less work. So now we have 24 equals negative 3n. Divide negative 3, divide negative 3. N will be negative 8. All right, there we go. That's all there is to it. So make sure you watch this video in its entirety before you start the homework. And I will have the specific problems listed that you need to do. And as always, if you ever need help, just let me know.